I use this to teach unit economics in the past, but it's a kind of an indication of why you might necessarily not just need a single unit economic, even for a single kind of group of resources. So let's say you have two aircraft, right? And you have one old one and one new one, and there's 30 years difference in technology between the two. And if I take one off and fly it across the Atlantic, it costs me X amount. If I take the second one off and fly it across the Atlantic, it costs me Y. So I've got two aircraft and I've got a cost per mile, very clear cost per mile. So I might have the new aircraft has a much, much lower cost per mile. And that's great, right? So that new aircraft is clearly better in every way. Okay. Now, if I've only got one unit economic, that's what I'm working on, because this one has a way lower cost per mile. It might be that that particular one is a nice aircraft, but relatively small cabin, right? And the reason why it's got such a good cost per mile is because it's lighter or it has fewer people on it. So I probably need to think about the same thing. I need to think about cost per passenger. So if I've got three times the number of passengers on the old aircraft, then it's three times more efficient in terms of my costs, right? Because I've got three times more passengers. So a unit economic is great because it provides you with that kind of efficiency within the boundary of the resources that support it as a demand driver. But it's not the only picture. And it was really interesting because I used this example I was with a room full of CFOs and finance people, and I was, droning on about FinOps and what, cost buckets, and they were all sort of dozing off. But when I started to use that example, they started to argue about which was the most useful, whether it was cost per passenger or cost per mile, and how would you factor in, well, what about things like the length of the runway? That would surely cost in fact, and all of it, they were basically talking in business terms. They'd switched to something which they understood and which was functional. Now that is, in a sense, that's like the unit economics and FinOps working at a peak efficiency, right? Because it's IT action being driven by business demand or business requirements, and businesses getting all the information they need and no more.
I think what it really highlights is, yes, you do need to have multiple unit economics and multiple KPIs within any given system, but the KPIs that matter, or the unit economics in this case that matter to the senior management, are not going to be the same ones that matter to the engineers.